Yo, what's up? Right now, there are two World War II FPS games that are competing for the title of best World War II shooter game in the world. On one hand, the classical milsim Hell Let Loose, and on the other, the combined arms warfare squad-based shooter Enlisted. And despite having the same setting, both games almost look like complete opposites of each other. So, now is the time to find out which game is better, Enlisted or Hell Let Loose. Both games will be ranked across 10 different categories in which they can get 0, 1 or 2 points. 0 means the game isn't good enough in this particular category, 1 means it's okay, and 2 means it's really good. And we start with one of the most important aspects of any FPS game, the maps. Because no matter how good the weapons or the mechanics are, if the maps are not fun to play in, the game will suffer, and especially the fun that you have playing the game will suffer. The good news is, both games provide some really interesting and fun to play maps, but Hell Let Loose is the clear winner with 2 points here, because not only does it have some of the best looking maps out of all World War II games, it also has the possibly most realistic maps. Not just in terms of how they are depicting the real life areas, but how they are built. The grass and the bush areas alone put them miles above Enlisted. In Enlisted you also have grass, you also have bushes, but you cannot hide effectively in them. Because the grass is not tall enough, the bush animations aren't really realistic, and they barely work with the camouflage of the uniforms. In Hell Let Loose, on the other hand, you can perfectly use any patch of grass that you find or any bush that you find to hide, to work with shadows, to work with different textures. It just feels really realistic, and the maps are just great. And the size of the maps, if you like big, long, slower battles, the gigantic maps of Hell Let Loose are perfect for you. If you like faster games, there are also smaller maps in Hell Let Loose, which are basically smaller versions of the large maps, so everyone can play exactly what he wants. And the best thing is, since you're picking the servers you play in, you can always play exactly the map you want to play. And this is the biggest weakness of Enlisted maps. Their size isn't much of a problem. They have, many would say, something closer to a perfect map size in Hell Let Loose. But the fact that you have, across the dozens of maps and 6 game modes, you have over 100 different iterations of the maps, and most of them being simply bad, and you not really having an ability to pick which map you want to play, yeah, that's not a good sign for Enlisted. Enlisted gets 1 point because there's still many good maps, but the fact that they're quite rare, and the fact that you can't really pick them, not even with the map picking system that Enlisted has implemented, Hell Let Loose definitely wins in this category. Next, at point 2, we have atmosphere, which in this context means how immersive does it feel when you play the game. Because you can have good maps in a game, but they still can feel not too realistic or not too immersive. For example, Hell Let Loose has all types of weather and daytime effects. You can get nighttime, you can get daytime, you can get sunny, you can get, dusk, you can get snowstorms, you can get sandstorms, you can get rain, you can get thunder, you can get bright blue skies, you can get gray skies, you can get all types of weather effects, all types of immersive effects that make games more interesting, that make games feel different, and especially make maps really great and unique. All of this is perfectly depicted in Hell Let Loose. That's why it gets, once again, 2 points. Enlisted, sadly, gets 0 points because there's barely any immersion in the game. The game has almost no weather effects. The game doesn't have day and night, it only has day. And the few weather effects it has are very rare, and most are tied to only 1 or 2 maps when it comes to, for example, snowstorms and sandstorms. So it's basically always the same sunny weather that you get every single game. And despite having still good maps, it quickly gets boring because every game feels the same. There's nothing special, and most importantly, if you're playing a World War II game, you really want to feel the old atmosphere. You really want to feel the rainy, doomy atmosphere of the Normandy landings. You want to feel the cold, freezing snowstorm of the Eastern Front, and so on. But you don't feel it in Enlisted because there's basically nothing that creates immersion. Another problem is the color palette. Hell Let Loose has a very realistic color scheme, on all maps, automatically. In Enlisted, you get way too intense bright colors, which highly ruin the atmosphere. Because there's not just do the maps look less realistic, but the whole atmosphere doesn't feel like a real serious World War II game if the grass is too bright. If fields are all the same shade of yellow, it looks more like some Bob the Builder game than a real World War II game. So sadly, Enlisted only 0 points in this category. Next, we have guns. Of course, integral for a World War II game, especially when it comes to the historical depiction of guns. Hell Let Loose gets 1 point here because it shows all the famous, iconic, and historically relevant guns in the game. As a German, you get your MP40, your K98K, your MG42, your MG44, your Panzerfaust, your STG, even your FG42s. You get all of that. And the same is true for other nations. So that's basically all you might wish for in a normal World War II game. Enlisted manages to get 2 points by being possibly the best game ever when it comes to depicting World War II guns. Why? Because it simply has insane amounts of different weapons. Not only does it have all the standard weapons, it also depicts them in different variants. For example, the MG42 alone has 5 to 6 different variants in the game, depending on how you count them. The STGs also have different variants, ranging from early prototypes to late war, highly efficient, low quality production versions. So it's simply impossible to compete with the amount of guns that Enlisted has. Especially the German tech tree is filled not just with German guns, but also with many captured weapons, and also with all of the foreign guns that were used by German foreign divisions across World War II. So here, quite easy, Hell Let Loose 1 point, Enlisted 2 points. Next we have a point that most FPS games struggle with, vehicles. Especially for a World War II themed game, it's absolutely essential that you have tanks and planes. Especially if you want to depict famous battles like Battle of Kursk, which was very tank heavy, all of the early and also late Eastern Front campaigns, very tank heavy, in the Normandy campaigns, the Buckage warfare, lots of planes, lots of tanks, the Ardennes offensive, very famous, the forward pushes of the last German tank offensives. All of this requires vehicles, all of this requires mobility, and all of this requires the balance of tanks and planes. Tanks being great against infantry, and planes being great against tanks, and tanks being quite weak against planes. So all of this creates a very fun and unique and engaging dynamic. If a game only has guns and maybe something like a few tanks, you don't have the dynamic anymore. You have a very one-sided system where tanks are overpowered basically, and you have to somehow limit them to prevent them from shooting up all the infantry on the map, which is what Hell Let Loose does. It has a very, very low quality, outdated tank system, and in order to somehow balance tanks, the game, well, limits the amount of tanks you can play heavily, and also limits the way that tanks can be played by making them extremely annoying to play. Enlisted has the exact opposite approach. Enlisted has tanks, and not just a few tanks, it has over 100 of them, possibly even hundreds soon enough. Same thing goes for planes. The game has, let's put it this way, the game has more planes than Enlisted has weapons, tanks, and planes together. For all nations. It's like, Enlisted, if you like, combined arms warfare is the perfect game. It's definitely better than Hell Let Loose, and it's definitely superior to most games on the market, since it's the only one where you can casually jump into a tank and use it. You can casually jump into a plane if you're good with flying and use it. You also have access to APCs, you have access to trucks, you have access to bikes, you have access to self-propelled artillery, self-propelled anti-air guns, and so on. You have all types of planes, you have biplanes, you have fast fighter planes, you have types of attack planes, even medium bombers, and even jet planes. So, yeah, in Hell Let Loose, one of the biggest weaknesses of Hell Let Loose is the almost complete lack of vehicles. Enlisted, though, has this as one of its biggest strengths, so case is clear, Hell Let Loose 0 and Enlisted 2 points. At number 5 we have the special items category. This includes everything that isn't normal gunfighting. So engineering or special abilities or marking enemies or dropping mines and so on. Now this aspect can significantly improve the fun that you have when playing a game. Even low quality games, if they have some really cool special features, can become insanely fun. Sadly though, both games aren't too good in this aspect. In modern game design, you have already seen basically all ideas one could come up with for shooter games when it comes to special things. Different types of melee things, building traps, dropping grenades, building barbed wire, and so on. Everything was already invented. The only problem is, do games actually implement these ideas well? Hell Let Loose sadly completely fails at that, because you barely have anything creative. Yeah, you can drop mines with a few classes. Yeah, your commander can call a raid, but that's literally early 2000s game design. There's nothing special with that. There is an engineer in the game, but this is possibly the worst designed part of the whole game, because the engineer cannot build anything by himself. The engineer requires teammates to bring you supplies before the engineer can build. Problem is, most of the time your teammates won't bring you supplies, and if you want to do it by yourself, you have to go through a 5 to 10 minutes long hassle just to build one sandbag. This is by definition horrible game design. And rightfully this gives Hell Let Loose 0 points. Enlisted on the other hand, well, much better. Sadly not too great, but still much better. If you want to build something in Enlisted, you can do it very easily, and also many different structures. If you want to drop mines, you can do it. If you want to mark enemies, you can do it. You can do everything. You can even do reconnaissance flights by flying around with your plane and marking the whole map and finding hidden enemy tanks and hidden enemy NPCs and so on. So yeah, definitely better. Enlisted sadly doesn't deserve 2 points here because it could be much better. The amount of structures that you build could easily be expanded, but doesn't really get expanded. And also, as every veteran of the game knows, new players don't have access to engineers, even though Enlisted only works if every player builds rally points with his engineers. So one of the biggest strengths of the game, the engineer system, is also one of the biggest weaknesses, because new players don't get access to them. So yeah, sadly only 1 point, but still infinitely better than Hell Let Loose. Next we have perks and upgrades, meaning, can you level up your soldiers or your items within the game? Can you customize your soldiers in terms of what weapons they carry, how they behave, how good they are at specific things, and so on. So basically RPG mechanics. Now, in order for modern FPS game to keep up with modern game design standards, they absolutely have to include these things, because if you cannot customize your soldier for different roles, for different skill sets, you won't have a realistic display of World War II warfare. Because a conflict where dozens of millions of soldiers fought absolutely had all types of highly specialized soldiers with different strengths and weaknesses. And Hell Let Loose has this as one of its biggest weaknesses, sadly, because all of the soldiers there behave and function the same way. They move the same way. They handle weapons the same way. Doesn't matter if you have a fresh recruit or a career officer with 15 years experience, they all use their gun the same way, which is completely nonsensical, obviously. And fun fact, your soldiers can't even swim, because if they get into water, they drown within 5 seconds. So yeah, this is just ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. And your guns can't be modified. You cannot change iron sights. You cannot change the bolts of your guns. You cannot change scopes. You don't even have different versions of the guns. Yeah, you don't have late war production or early war production. You don't have anything. It's highly monolithic, which literally screams early 2000s game design. Enlisted in that regard is much better. You have, well, all types of weapons. You have weapon upgrade levels. You have, well, for the weapons it's not too distinct, but your soldiers are nicely customizable in terms of their abilities, because you have the perk system, and you can give your soldiers different abilities with the perk points that they have. You can make your soldiers be very good at running or very good at jumping. You can make them very tanky so they can withstand more damage, or you can give them more stamina so they can run for much longer, or you can let them handle weapons better, or all types of different things. So these abilities make the game feel more realistic, also more engaging, because you're closer to your soldiers, almost like a commander who's training his own soldiers. So in that regard, Enlisted definitely better than Hell Let Loose. Hell Let Loose gets 0 points and Enlisted gets 1 point. 1 point because it could be better. What Enlisted delivers here isn't too fancy. It's basically okay relative to what other games deliver. It could be much better. Hopefully will be much better in the future, but currently it's just better than Hell Let Loose, and 1 deserved point. At number 7 we have game modes, because a game can give you great maps, but if it doesn't let you play them in a fun way, what are they worth? Counter-Strike taught the whole gaming world how to do it right by having single maps that are so good that there are people out there, millions of people actually, who since 15 years don't play anything else but this one map in this one particular game mode. So this is the power of having a strong game mode that actually makes something very fun playing. Hell Let Loose definitely wins here with 2 points, because the game has multiple game modes which are distinct in a way. They are either more attack-based or more defense-based, or both together. And once again, the game lets you pick whatever you want to play. So if you like one specific way of playing the game, you can have it always. And this gives perfect player satisfaction. Very well done, very simple, a perfect recipe for success. Enlisted has the opposite. It has 6 game modes, of which most are not good, of which most are disliked by the player base, but the game still forces them upon you, and you can't do anything against it, as described the map picking problem in the first category of the video. So yeah, the game still has good maps and good game modes, but overall it's simply not up to date with modern gaming standards, where you have either almost only good things, or if there are many good and bad things, the player chooses what he wants to play. In Enlisted it's simply not possible, and Hell Let Loose on the other hand, it's very possible, so a well-deserved win for Hell Let Loose. Next we have customization, and this is surprisingly something most games fail at least modern games. There was a time when games, despite quite primitive technology, delivered with good customization options. Shooter games offered you different types of uniforms, different types of camouflages, different types of weapon skins, and so on. Everyone was happy. Best example is Counter-Strike, highly successful and basically completely monetized with customizations. Now, Hell Let Loose and Enlisted sadly both fail in that regard, because in Hell Let Loose you barely get any customization. I remember when buying the game, I bought it in a bundle that included a bit of customization. Now, since I didn't understand anything about the game, I just assumed, oh, cool, I'm gonna have lots of cool different uniforms for all of my armies. And then, after playing the game, I noticed, wait, where are the different uniforms? Turns out it was like 1 or 2 uniforms, or like I even had trouble finding them. So, yes, there's basically no customization. And the thing is, Enlisted, Hell Let Loose delivers well with their snow maps. So they're distinct white or green maps, or yellow maps if you're playing in the Tunisian area. But you always have to manually switch the uniform during the game, which is insanely annoying. And since you have different classes, you sometimes have to click multiple times. And this could be easily automated with 1970s coding. But it wasn't done yet, so this is ridiculously low quality. And if you dream of actually customizing your soldiers in a really creative, like just even a historically accurate way, you just can't do it. Like the different customizations the game offers are simply way too primitive. They're not up to date with modern standards. And also you have lots of censorship, which is another issue with many World War II games. Keep in mind, not all World War II games well, you could say some, you could say 50-50, whatever it is. There are games that don't have any issues with censorship. Hell Let Loose does. So this is another weak spot, because the more you censor, the less historically accurate you are, the less immersive you are, and also, well, the fewer choices players have. Enlisted is a bit better in that regard, simply due to the fact that the customizations don't cost anything. Well, there are paid customizations, but there are also lots of free ones, so that is good. And the uniforms, well, despite having hundreds of different, theoretically thousands of different combinations of uniform pieces, the game still manages to automatically adjust them to the map. So if you're fighting in a snow area, you will get a white uniform. If you're fighting in Tunisia, a yellow one, and so on. In Normandy, a green. If Enlisted manages to succeed in that with a much more complicated system, there's no reason why Hell Let Loose shouldn't do it. So yeah. Also Enlisted, if you want to pay money, same as in Hell Let Loose, because the customization there costs money, you get access to even more uniforms and even very fancy ones. So yeah, it could be much better in Enlisted. They could be better, they could look more realistic, the models could be more realistic, and also there could be no censorship, because there's lots of censorship in Enlisted too. But despite that, it's still okay. So a deserved 1 point for Enlisted. Without censorship, it could be easily 2, and deserved 0 points for Hell Let Loose. Next we have realism and historical accuracy. This is a highly sensitive and controversial point, especially for the Hell Let Loose fan base, because they love to believe that Hell Let Loose is a high quality milsim. Problem with that assumption is there's this fallacy polluting the minds of milsim players that having slow, clumsy game mechanics turns a game into a milsim. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It can, but it doesn't necessarily. For example, the horrible tank mechanics in Hell Let Loose, where every single tank has exactly 3 tankers, and every single tank has the same gear system, and every single tank has the same ridiculous turret traverse system, and so on. It's a joke. It's an utter joke. But people tend to believe that having to crank every single gear with your own hand and by clicking 1 trillion times turns the game into a milsim. No, it doesn't. This is ridiculous. And especially if you were in the army yourself, or if you have high quality understanding and knowledge of World War II, you will see that many aspects of Hell Let Loose simply drag the realism down. And if a game contains too many unrealistic features, it cannot be a milsim, no matter how many superficial armchair general aspects it has. So not being able to swim, not a milsim. Not having any combined arms fair aspects, not a milsim. Having ridiculously bad tank mechanics, not a milsim. Every soldier behaving the same way and having exactly the same body, not a milsim. And so on and so on. Yeah, so there's simply not much that really brings realism. Now, the things that actually bring realism to Hell Let Loose are the maps, the size of the maps, and the details in which the nature is worked out. This gives the game realism. The fact that hiding within the vegetation is a valid strategy, this makes it highly realistic. The fact that crawling around for 1 minute instead of running for 5 seconds, this makes it realistic. Because if you read World War II reports of battlefields, yeah, there were actually situations where crawling around, even for sometimes half of a day, was valid. There are many famous accounts of battles where units crawled for multiple hours over a field in order to avoid detection. Instead of just risking it and running across the field and potentially getting the mission done much faster, but potentially also completely failing at the mission, yeah? This is viable in Hell Let Loose. This is actually realism. In Enlisted, this isn't really viable, A, because the game is too fast usually, and B, because once again, the nature doesn't really suit itself for hiding. So, yeah. But, well, this is one thing that Hell Let Loose makes better than Enlisted, but Enlisted makes many other things better. As I already said, the combined arms warfare, the vast selection of weapons you have, also the where you can change your soldiers, you can make them as much, you can customize them as you want. All of this also provides a nice boost of realism. So overall, and this is something that many people don't want to, this is the truth many players, many fans of both games don't want to face. Overall, both games are similarly realistic. Because what Hell Let Loose makes right in terms of realism, Enlisted doesn't, but what Hell Let Loose completely fails at, Enlisted succeeds in. So yeah, overall they're quite balanced. I give both games 1 point each. And for the end we have community. I noticed one thing from watching many game comparison videos on YouTube over the last years, and it's that almost all of them omit the community aspect. Well, this might be due to the people who make, especially big channels, making videos like these, not because they played both games oftentimes and know them, but just because they got paid for these videos and only spent like 10 hours playing both games. Yeah, so of course these people won't know the communities well. And secondly, oftentimes there isn't too much good stuff you can say about communities, and people rather avoid talking about highly negative, controversial things. Now, the problem is both games today have some issues when it comes to the communities. Keep in mind, there are also games with highly positive communities. For example, many very old, small niche games like Age of Empires 2 or Baldur's Gate had a really nice resurgence over the last years, mostly thanks to the great, amazing, positive, comfy communities where everyone getting into Reddit or Discord instantly feels like he's surrounded by nice, positive people, where he wants to be around these people and where he will want to play the game. Hell Let Loose in that regard is a very average game. If you jump into its Reddit or Discord, you will find a normal community with not much toxicity. You can talk with the people, you can ask questions as a new player, and everything's going to be fine. So nothing too special. Enlisted, on the other hand, is a much different issue because there you actually have tons of toxicity, and which is also one of the reasons holding the game down. Because as a new player, if you jump into the Reddit or the Discord or multiple Discords or the forum, first thing you see is 50% toxicity. And I've been in many gaming communities over the last 15 years, and this is by far the most toxic one, by far. Actually, it's the only toxic one I ever experienced myself, because I usually don't stay in toxic communities, but this game I decided to play a few years ago, and yep, the contrast is extreme. It's basically the League of Legends of World War II shooters. It's just ridiculous, and it's even a bottleneck factor for player-based growth, because new players, if they ask questions, for example in Reddit, well, maybe they get 1/3 of the time helpful advice, but the other 2/3, they will get downvoted, they will get insulted, they will get passive-aggressive comments why they are bad. Well, maybe it's because it's a new player, but okay. And other complete brain rot, which is just simply embarrassing. Yeah, so the Enlisted community has significant toxicity issues. Yeah, there are a few good people in the community. Well, here's the problem. The majority are, of course, normal people. But the majority of Enlisted doesn't really interact on social media. So what you have is like almost all the toxic slobs are highly active. They are super active on social media, and what you see is more than half of everything that's posted is just toxicity and negativity, and the mods of Enlisted are also among the worst you can find in any gaming community, so there's no improvement or no change when it comes to that. And once again, new players, it's not recommendable for a new player, especially for younger players, if they want to have a good surrounding, if they want to have nice people around them, to expose themselves to such an environment. So, who takes the lead after 10 tough rounds? Hell Let Loose got 9 points, Enlisted earned itself 10 points, making it the winner of our comparison video. Woohoo! But wait, there's more. Because you shouldn't let an 11% difference decide what game is better or what game you should try out. What's actually much more helpful is the following summary in one sentence. Hell Let Loose looks and feels better but has much worse gameplay. Enlisted looks and feels uglier and is uglier, but it has much better gameplay. It lets you do many more things, especially things that other FPS games don't even have remotely as well implemented as Enlisted. Most importantly, the vehicle aspect. So if you value graphics, looks and immersion more, Hell Let Loose is the better game. If you want faster, and if you want slower gameplay, Hell Let Loose is better. But if you want faster gameplay, if you want much better weapons variety, if you want tanks and planes and similar vehicle structures, and if you want to do special things like engineering, Enlisted is much better. So that's it. This is the comparison of both games, Enlisted and Hell Let Loose, and I would say the overall result is what I expected, both games being overall of the same quality, but due to completely different advantages and disadvantages, which fits exactly what I experienced from playing 3 years Enlisted and from playing roughly 6 months of Hell Let Loose. Alright, let me know what you think. Drop it in the comments down below to have a nice comfy discussion about our 2 favorite games. And of course like the video if you heard something good or surprising. And of course subscribe to get even more interesting videos in the near future. Until soon, goodbye.